Hello, my name is Mandy Tice. I am director of the School of Atelier Arts and an atelier trained artist. And today I'm going to be giving a shading art lesson. Now, I'm going to use the very simple concept of a sphere and talk about some really overriding shading concepts that are not too complicated to understand, but that if you apply them consistently, you will get shaded, beautiful, rendered work that makes sense and is believable. Right now we have a circle on our page, which is 2D. It doesn't look round at all. And our job with shading and understanding how shading works is to make this flat circle into a rounded form. Now, today I've placed a little sun that you can see, and it's going to be hitting our sphere about here. Now, keep in mind that one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're shading a sphere, or anything for that matter, is they make the mistake of thinking that the lightest part of the sphere is over here. But that's not actually true, because you have a rounded sphere. It's turning away from the light in all directions. And what that means is that this curved part of the sphere is curving away from the light by the time it reaches the edge. So the true uh, place in this example where the light is hitting the sphere is going to be inside of that edge. It's not on the edge. The edge actually gets a little bit darker. That's not something many people understand or know about, and we're going to talk about why today in this shading and rendering techniques video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this sphere into light and shadow. So what happens is that there's an exact place where the sphere turns away from the light, and in our fake example here, it's going to be approximately here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fill in this. This is going to be our shaded side of the sphere. Now, there's a lot of people that obsess over reflected light or whatever. That's actually not important. And besides, this is a rendering video where we don't render shadows. So we're going to completely ignore that. And I'm not going to take forever filling this in perfectly. We're just going to, you know, do our best here. Okay, so we have the shadow, and because this is a rendering video, we are going to be rendering the light. In theory, there'd be a cast shadow down here too, but this is just all a distraction because that's not what this video is about. Okay, so, and that's actually a terrible ellipse. Let me redo it or it's going to bother me the whole rest of the video. If you want to learn more about ellipses, I have on the School of Atelier Arts channel. So I run two channels, the Da Vinci Initiative channel and the School of Atelier Arts channel. So on the School of Atelier Arts channel, I have a rendering of a sphere in oil paint that talks extensively about the ellipse. There's a whole hour-long video on the ellipse. I'm not going to go into that here, but you can watch it on that channel. Please make sure to subscribe and like both this channel and the School of Atelier Arts channel. Okay, so rendering, that's what we're talking about today. So we've decided our light source, which is important. We want one light source when we're rendering. We've created the division between light and shadow. Now, this is a quick video just to give a big overview of shading and rendering, but you can shade and render at a really refined level, and you can shade and render at a rougher level. But today, I just want to teach one big concept that if you can keep this in your head, will help you render and shade better than you can right now. And that is, the closer you are to a light source, the lighter something's going to be, and the further away from the light source, the darker something's going to be. That means that the X is the part of the sphere that's closest to our light source. That's going to be the lightest part of our sphere. But as we get further away from that X, it's actually going to get darker and darker. This part of our sphere here is going to be much darker than where our X is, even though both are receiving light, because this, what I just circled, is further away from our sun than the X. Now, I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of our video, but the form is actually turning through the X in all directions, right? And so what's happening is where the X is the lightest part, anything that's not the X is going to get a little bit darker the further it is away from the X, because the X is representing the brightest part of our sphere, where the sun is hitting it most perpendicularly, okay? So what this also means is that as we get further from the X, there's actually going to be some value on the edge of the sphere. This is what people forget all the time, and they create these wonky looking spheres. And it doesn't matter if you're rendering a sphere or something else even, right? The sphere is used as an example, but you can be rendering a face, you can be rendering all sorts of things. But if you leave this edge over here completely white, it kills your form, because any rounded form is turning away from the light on the edges. Okay, that's a lot of theory. If that doesn't make sense to you yet, don't worry because I'm going to show it to you. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on just rendering what's called across the form. This is the next key thing. So rule number one, things that are closer to our light source are brighter, things that are further away from our light source are darker. So the brightest part of our sphere is where it's most perpendicular to the light. I've placed an X there. And the second thing is that we want to render across the form. All right. The mistake that a lot of people are going to make is they're going to say, oh, I know how to draw a sphere. I know how to render a sphere. And they're going to start doing dumb stuff like this. Okay. And going up and down on the sphere. All right. And I'm going to show you the difference between how bad this looks and why we render across the form. The reason is because this part of the sphere down here, let me get red so this is really obvious. This part of the sphere down here is a different distance from the light from this part of the sphere up here. Do you see how this is a much shorter distance than this, right? But what happens when you render up and down the sphere is you're making both the same distance from the sun and it kills your form. That's the difference between really amateur rendering and professional looking rendering. Informed, atelier rendering considers all aspects of the form and we work across the form. So if you want to bring a level of sophistication to your rendering and your shading, then you want to work across the form. So what does that look like? I'm basically going to make a strip going across our form, right, through the light source and off to the other side. Now, essentially what we're doing is we're using values I use a 9-step value scale. There's lots of value scales out there. They all look different. I use a 9-step, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, where 9 is our darkest dark and our 1 is a light, and then our 5 is halfway in between, our 6 is a little bit darker, etc., etc. Something like this. Obviously, this is the quick version. Something that looks approximately like this. So another mistake students make when they start rendering, we're going to render across the form. We know that that's the way to do it now. But the other mistake students make is they go like this. They put one really dark value down and then a medium value, and then that's it, right? What we want to do is make sure that, we're going to be pulling out at around the 7, but we want to make sure that we're hitting each and every one of these values until we get to the light, right? We don't want to skip values. So it's really important that we understand where our light source is coming from, the most perpendicular part of our form to the sphere. It's important that we work across the form. It's important that we understand that the closer to our light source, the lighter something's going to be, and the further away from our light source, the darker something's going to be. And it's important that we move through all of our values, no skipping values here, okay? If you want something to look really rounded, just really beautifully rendered, it's an art of subtlety hitting each of these values. Now, I'm working quickly today. This is intended to be a quick demo so that our teachers can use it in their classroom, or for those of you who are looking for your first foray into rendering, I don't want to intimidate you too much. So I'm going to be using kind of a sloppier stroke just to cover more space with less time today. But please know that you can take this very slowly and very carefully shade, but people don't need to be taught how to carefully shade. What they need to be taught is how light works, working across the form and making sure that they're hitting all their values up here. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that I'm shading, and I'm going to use a slight kind of a scribble shading, and I'm just getting lighter and lighter as I head towards my X here, okay? But I want to make sure that my transitions, that I'm getting lighter, that I'm not getting lighter and then dark and then light and then dark. And I want to make sure by the time that I get close to my X that I've really hit each of my values, okay? So we're not skipping any values. We're hitting all of them. And, this can even get a little further apart up here. Now, as I go through my X, on the other side, oops, that's a little too dark. I want to do the same thing, still hitting my values and getting a little bit darker, and it's going to land at around a 2 on the other side. But do you see how just doing this one passage is already making our sphere look round? It's miraculous, really. Now, here, I'm going to get my red again just so we can really All right, here we talked about this a little bit. This is a different distance than this. Okay, this is a little bit longer than this one. So we're going to stay in our darks a little bit longer when we go through the top. So this time I'm going to go across the form. Remember, we're going across the form. We are not doing this. If I haven't gotten that through your heads yet, we are not doing this. Do not do this. You're going to be tempted to. There's going to be a little devil on your shoulder being like, you know what would be easier than spending all this time going across your form? Let's just do this instead. Don't do it. That's the devil trying to trick you, okay? If you believe in that. You don't want to fall for it, right? Be disciplined. Even if you don't think it's true, maybe you've done a lot of spheres. Maybe you've done a lot of spheres this way. Would it really kill you to try doing it this way? I promise you'll learn something. Okay, go across the form. All right, so anyways, I'm going to start and I'm going to go across this way here. And because we have a longer distance, right, it's going to stay darker a little bit longer because where I'm starting is further away from the light source than where I started last time. And again, you can make this really smooth and even. This is quick for a demo, all right? It's got a little dark in the end. Okay, and I have a lot of experience. I'm an atelier trained artist. I've been working as an atelier trained artist for many years. What I'm doing with this scribble is not as easy as it looks, okay? So if you're struggling, if you're using a scribbling technique and you're having a hard time getting it as even as you're seeing it here, it's not you, it's just that your lack of practice of approaching it this way. And you'll get more control over your medium with practice, which of course is the least satisfying answer for all students, but it's the truth. All right, so now I'm going across the other way, and this time we're getting a little darker than we did last time, more like a 2.5, because this part of our sphere down here is further away from our light source than this part of the sphere, okay? Are you seeing why we have to work across the form? If I just did this, that naughty thing that I keep telling you not to do you see how it's saying that this and this are the same? And they're not. They're at different parts of the sphere and receiving different amounts of light. Okay, so I'm hoping by now that you're seeing where we're going with this. I'm going to very quickly, again, I intended this to be a short demonstration. I'm going to do a few more just to emphasize the point, um, just so you can see how it starts weaving together and connecting. But you have to think of these things independently. You can't go up and down, okay? Don't do the up and down thing. It's a trick to kill your form. Okay, and then of course we're going through this way, and this part is even further away from the one above it, right? So it's going to be a little bit darker. And I can even pull out of the shadow up here for my next kind of strip, right? And again, we're trying to go through all of the values, right? All the way from our darkest values, and I'm seeing now that I can actually darken the previous one a little bit. Okay, and of course we're going all the way through our X to the other side, and this part's a little bit lighter because it's closer to the light source than the strip to the right. All right, so I hope that you're getting the big idea here. I'm going to quickly continue working a few more strips just so you can see how they knit together. Again, working across the other side. Now, once you get all your strips in, you may make some adjustments, like it's looking like the one that I made previous to this one didn't quite get dark enough. But what I'm not doing, again, I'm not doing up and down shading. You're going to kill your form. It's not the same. If you treat it the same, you're going to flatten your form. Okay, so again, and again, this is just a quick little demonstration to help you understand how light reveals form, how each part of the form has its own unique relationship to the light, and how you cannot treat it the same, and you cannot go up and down on your shading. I see a few areas. I'm going to get my red just to, this strip is a little bit light. Those two strips are a little bit light, so I'm going to adjust the values on those a little bit. Once you get everything in, you can make adjustments, and that's fine. But notice that I'm still making adjustments again across the form, not this way. It's going to be even more tempting now to do that. Do not do that. I'm going to make some adjustments over here. Okay. Now, this was a really quick thing. I don't want to spend too much time rendering this. This isn't intended to be a fine rendering. This is to introduce shading and rendering skills. So if you take anything away from this video, what you want to take away is that one, the closer something is to the light source, the brighter it is, right? So this part is the brightest part. It's the most perpendicular to our light source. Two, that there's different distances, right? So they're not all the same. Oops. They're not all the same, right? Especially when you go to these far-flung areas. There's different lengths of time you have to get from your shadow to your light. And we're working across form, right? We are not, I repeat, not doing this. Bad, nix, nux, new. Do not do that. So we're working across the form. We understand that the closer to the light source, the brighter it is, the further away, the darker it is. That different parts of our sphere have their own unique relationship to the light, and we cannot treat them all equal like this. This is bad. Again, if I haven't gotten that through your heads yet, this is bad. Don't do this. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining me today. Please make sure to like and follow this channel. We have two channels, the School of Atelier Arts and the Da Vinci Initiative. I hope you'll follow us on both. And please make sure to sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter is wildly popular, and I send my very best lessons exclusively to our newsletter community. You don't want to miss it. There's a link in the description where you can sign up for our newsletter. Thanks, everybody, and I hope to see you next time.